Welcome to The Difference Makers, a Paladin security podcast. We'll take you inside the world of security and share firsthand expertise from our industry professionals. Join us as we dive into everything security and explore the journeys of those who go above and beyond to make our world a safer and friendlier place.
Welcome to The Difference Makers. I'm Christina Hidanis. Matt Garcin is this month's guest. He is a director for Paladin Security and spearheaded the first joint venture for the company in Alberta. Along with that, he oversees security for the oil and gas sector, which can be some of the toughest work out there. In this month's episode, Matt explains camp work, the importance of creating strong relationships with clients in remote locations, and of course, what goes into creating and carrying out a joint venture. So welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So you joined Paladin in 2013 as a security officer and held many roles on your way to becoming director. How do you feel that working in the field benefited you when you moved into the office?
I think it gives you a sense of relatability and what's important when you're dealing with staff and what actually matters to the staff and the clients. Having some experience in the field is really important when it comes to relationships with your staff and being able to have that feeling of actual empathy when something happens.
So what would you say would be one of the biggest things that you took from your time in the field that you can use with your officers or guards if they come to you with a problem or an issue?
I think the most important thing is listening. It's really important to have an ear that someone feels they can speak to and someone that can understand what they're going through, but more importantly, just give them the space to vent their frustrations or a very specific situation that they've run into. I think listening is key to our role when it comes to interacting with field staff.
Has that been something that you've always been good at, or is it a skill that you've had to learn and hone as you've kind of moved up within Paladin?
Yeah. Absolutely something that I've learned and grown with over the years. It's very different when you come from interacting with people where you're listening to, say, members of the public or clientele, to listening to staff and whether it's office staff or field staff. So it's definitely something I've had to grow with and work on and make a conscious effort to be better at.
Mm-hmm. Now, as the director for Northern Alberta, you cover Fort McMurray, Grand Prairie, and everywhere in between. So much area. A lot of that area is tight-knit communities, places that you have to build and earn trust. How do you keep a good relationship or build a good relationship with the clients and customers and even staff if you're not, exactly right where they are in that certain region and show that, you appreciate them or that we're fit for the job or whatever you're trying to convey to them?
I think a lot of it comes back to the basics of just being there and being available when people need you, whether it's a client or staff member. There's something to be said for interacting with people that answer the phone when you need them. And that tends to get lost sometimes in interactions in other companies. And I think it's something that's really important that we do as a group, but also when you're so spread out that, maybe somebody's 4 hours away, but it doesn't make their concern any less necessary for you to carry out. So it's really important for you to be there, be accessible, and just give support when needed.
Mm-hmm. What is the importance of connecting with community? I know that you like to get out in the community and be involved. I think in the first year I started, you did a mobile food drive that you had the mobile officers go and pick up food for people for the food banks. It was COVID. And, you like to be part of just different events around the city that, our clients are part of or that we're doing security for. So why is it important to you to connect with the community?
Well, I think when you're in smaller, more remote areas, it's really important for people to recognize that not only do you have a business there, but you live and work there. So the Cano Gala is an example of one that we've done for probably 7 or 8 years running now, where our staff, office staff included, volunteer their time. We do some interaction from the management level where we'll donate services of the staff. We'll make certain donations that maybe aren't sort of typical for our vertical of service offering. So it's really important that folks can see that you're out there and you care about the community that you live in. The food drives are an example of something that we've done essentially every year except for last year, where unfortunately they actually had an overflow of support,
Wow.
which is why we
Rare.
didn't do it.
Yeah.
Very rare. So something we're going to be trying to do again this year, and we actually really look forward to that one. Being able to go around the community, connect with all the different stores and donation locations, pick up all those donations, bring them down to the food bank, get interacting. Some FaceTime down there is great. You know, we try and get involved in essentially every area that we can in that regard, because it's so important that the community recognizes that you care about being here.
For sure. And speaking of community, I want to touch on a newer project and one that you are very proud of. It's a joint venture between Paladin and the Fort McMurray First Nation. It's the first joint venture for Paladin in Alberta to date. Why did this one make sense?
Well, the Fort McMurray First Nation's been a group of companies in a couple of different structures over an extended period of time. And they're very good at what they do. But more importantly, they also have a very strong focus on giving back to their community and servicing their community in a way that is really effective. So it's not just financial, but there's actually supportive mechanisms. You know, there's interest in getting folks into the field for work. There's interest for training. There's interest for true partnership and relationships. And I think moving forward, they're a very, very good partner for us. And it's going to give us some opportunity as an organization and as a joint venture to give back to them as well. They've got a great reach. Their traditional lands that we're respecting in this agreement are massive. It effectively encompasses the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, which is a very large landmass. And it gives us a great opportunity to give back over a large area.
Mm-hmm. Now, you touched on training and providing jobs and that type of thing. But I wanted to ask you a little bit first. Explain what a joint venture is for maybe people that are listening that might not fully be aware of what a joint venture would be.
Yeah, for sure. So it's, I guess in simplest terms, it's two businesses or two groups that decide to enter into an agreement where there's mutual benefit. Each side of the relationship has something to gain or give back, and there's really the mutual benefit's the most important part, I think. So in this context, the joint venture is that we benefit by being able to give back to the local First Nations communities and accessing different scopes of work. They benefit by getting folks with great training, scholarship opportunities, funding back to the nation. So the joint venture really is kind of as simple as it sounds, that you've got a business arrangement between two parties in joint where both can take something away.
For sure. Now, like I said, you touched on the training. How does that work? Is it that they have people and we help train them, or is it that we help hire people from the First Nation to work on the projects and train them? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different avenues. When there's a larger scope available, we're hoping to have a certain percentage of folks that could come from the First Nation that would train directly and work for that scope. The second part, more specifically, is something that we've offered out recently. And we're hoping to be able to get going in the new year. But we have internal trainers, as you know, that have certain capacities like management of aggressive behavior, something that we can offer locally. So we want to, just as a show of good faith through the partnership, to be able to offer their staff that may benefit from that, like in a customer-facing position or other public-facing position where they may have to deal with aggressive folks, whether it be at a site down south or on the nation itself or in town. So we're going to offer that training free of charge to be able to help out the nation and hopefully get some more qualified folks in the positions.
For sure. And there's also the the impact of them knowing the land, right? Like if there's any environmental concerns or whatever, like the people that live there understand the land. And so it kind of adds an extra level to the services that, Paladin would provide as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it's so important. I've been here for 11 years and don't hold a candle to understanding the scope of the land the same way that our nation partners do. And I spend a great deal of time outside. It's one of my kind of personal hobbies, and they understand so many things, Christina, that are impactful to them and to nature and the way of doing things that we may not even think of.
Yeah, it's a great aspect to learn from that. I think so. And you mentioned too that like some of the money will go back into the First Nation, and that there is a scholarship as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so our agreement works, loosely speaking, on we share a portion of the revenue back to the group of companies, which goes to funding initiatives on the nation. So as an example, this year they're starting on a new rec center, which has an elders facility, very kind of specific services that they wouldn't have otherwise. And a lot of that has been possible through their joint venture funding through these sorts of arrangements, which is amazing to see. The second part on the scholarship is once a year, each partner contributes an amount of money to the nation, where we fund one of their members to go to college, university, trade school, earn a post-secondary education without financial hindrance on themselves. And I think it's a really important part of the relationship to be able to give back something so meaningful and so impactful, where, someone may not have the financial means, and within a couple of years, they can be a very high level tradesperson making very, very good money. And it's a great source of impact for us in this relationship.
Yeah, definitely. That stood out to me when I was reading a bit about that. So I think it's very cool. Now, Paladin has a few joint ventures throughout the country, but like I mentioned, it's the first one in Alberta. What are some of the biggest challenges with creating something like this, kind of being the first in the province for Paladin to roll something like this out with the Fort McMurray First Nation?
Well, I think it's important that we looked at what the potential impacts were by doing it. And, there's not negatives included in the impacts that we looked at. It's all positive. And there's something that, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we wouldn't have evaluated quite the same way. But when we look at it now, and we understand and we take the time to evaluate the positives and negatives, that was the original challenge for us, I think, was to do that assessment and see where we were at, and see where the region was at, and see what mattered most to the First Nations communities. And we got to a point where this just made so much sense that we went ahead with it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so Paladin also provides service for the oil and gas sector up in northern Alberta. Obviously, that's a big industry. You have workers who are in camps on a unique schedule. Give us a little glimpse into their lives, your life, the day-to-day for how this all works.
Yeah, so it depends on the location, but they're, at the end of the day, I guess they're all very similar. You'll have a scope for a schedule where someone may work 7 days on, 7 days off, 7 nights on, 7 nights off. So you kind of get that full month rotational schedule of days and nights, all 12-hour days. Other specific scopes and camps may have a 2-week turnaround schedule. So you'll do 2 weeks of days, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks of nights, 2 weeks off. And you've got kind of some industry norms, I guess, with that. There's not a whole lot of deviation from that kind of schedule and the outlook and expectation of being in that camp environment. Outside of a very specific kind of emergent schedule change, that's essentially what everyone looks at working. Folks will receive all meals prepared for them. There's laundry facilities on site. Certain facilities will have more than others in the way of entertainment, but there's always something to do, and the folks are typically taken pretty decent care of in camp environments.
Yeah. So what about training? Is training any different for when it comes to this kind of work?
Yeah, and a lot of it's field-based. So we do have, additional separate courses for camp and industrial online, but it's such a unique environment where you're dealing with people both in a work environment, but camp also becomes their home. So there's two very big aspects that kind of conflict there. Most of the training is done in the field for that reason, because there's no way to effectively teach someone that they have to have a conversation they may have had otherwise while someone's carrying laundry. That's not sort of a typical environment for a security officer to be exposed to. So, it does take time, and we've got progression plans for different levels of progress through certain contracts where they are experienced and training based, but also competence based.
Right. Okay. Because this is, a little bit of a different beast compared to some other clients that Paladin has, what are some of the biggest challenges of this sector that you have run into?
On the industrial side, it's safety, for sure. The expectation of safety, but also the risk, are very, very different than other verticals that we deal with. Not to say that they're more dangerous, but they can be. Heavy mining equipment, explosions, gas leaks, these are all real risks to consider on a daily basis in these environments. So the safety aspect for the industrial is definitely the biggest one. And on the camp side, it really is that residential and work-life tie-in by far. There's a certain level of compassion that has to come along with the camp service offering, because you can't approach someone the same way, Christina, where they're in their own temporary home environment that you would while accessing a gate to a critical infrastructure site. They are completely different offerings. That's by far the biggest challenge for camp.
Interesting. So I want to go back to the safety part. I did have a note about this because I figured that it was something that, is always on the top of your mind. But what do you and your team do to ensure that everything is done, that, the safety is all covered and, we're following the highest standards and everyone is, taken care of?
Yeah, so we follow all the basics of the corporate Paladin OHS program. But in addition, the progression through the levels that I mentioned earlier also comes with safety competence assessments. So while you're learning safety specific rules for, say, one location or something that's vertical specific, that is evaluated as people learn and grow. It's also a huge performance evaluation, competency evaluation, because they're so important to that sort of scope. If you run into a live plant with a gas leak, you may not come out. And that's an unfortunate reality, which is why it's so important that we teach and train and evaluate on those things. We also have a safety manager that's specific, or safety supervisor that's specific for oversight in this vertical in the north. She's been around a very long time, very good at what she does, and her entire mandate is evaluation of our safety program, competency evaluation, and training and delivery of safety specific topics. We also track lost time injury free hours. It's one of the biggest, most important evaluators when it comes to individual clients in the region, and we've exceeded 1 million hours lost time injury free in the past. There's a lot that we tackle with the safety specific piece, but we also make sure that folks have PPE, additional training if they think they need it, the basic compliance, and then continued evaluation.
Okay, so I wanted to kind of turn it back to you just before we wrap things up. throughout your career, like, we've talked on just a few of the many things that you tackle throughout the day, but what are you most proud of?
That's a tough question, but I think it's probably the folks that I get the chance to work with. Our team in the north is, we are pretty spread out, Christina, and I have a lot of faith in them. And I'm really proud of the things that they do day to day and the way that they handle things. And I think their approach to a lot of what we do is so important. But by far, I'm most proud of the folks that I get the chance to work with.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really good group there.
They're amazing.
Now, if someone does want to join Paladin or your team or, work on anything that we kind of discussed throughout this podcast, what would be your advice to them?
I would say that they should speak to someone that's done it. That's kind of the most important part. We can talk about it, and we can send out documents, and we can do reviews, but until you get that firsthand information from someone that's done it and does do it, I don't think you'll have a real understanding of what it may look like. So my biggest encouragement would be to find someone that's either done it in the past or is currently doing it and pick their brain. Get the information from the source and ask real questions and maybe even hard questions. And that's your best source.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, well, thanks so much, Matt, for joining us. It was so good to get a little bit of an insight on what you do in Northern Alberta and, the big clients we have and the big work that we do with all the different verticals. And it was really cool to get a glimpse into that. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciated it. And hopefully folks can have some good information as takeaways from this.
Hey, thanks for tuning in with the Difference Makers. If you want to hear more about the ins and outs of the security industry from real professionals, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Also, check out new episodes on the first Tuesday of every month. Till next time.